Welcome back to the Mentor Show, which offers quick lessons packaged within minisodes for busy founders and startup leaders like you. I'm Adel, and I'm being mentored live and unscripted by Ed, who's built, sold, turned around, and scaled startups all the way to the New York Stock Exchange. He's based in the US, a developed economy, and I'm based in Dubai, a hub within an emerging economy. And we compare notes. This is real talk, no scripts, no theory. Let's get into it. What's the optimal way of becoming an excellent succession planner as a CEO, as a leader within a startup? And we spoke briefly about learning from the family businesses, where they got it right, where they got it wrong, and moving into the startup world from there. Can you please touch on that topic on succession planning? Why is it important?
As a business grows, the need for talent, the need for continuity is going to be, I believe that in the businesses that I've seen over the last 40 some years, whether they're private companies or closely held family companies, succession planning stumbles for a lot of different reasons. A lot of it is there's emotion in a family office. Are the descendants ready to take over the business? Do they have the skill? Do they have the desire? Are they the appropriate person? These are all very hard questions because they really are about relationships and perhaps even the culture itself. The culture in the Middle East is very different than the West. Family is very, very important. There's an assumption that the eldest son will always succeed the father or the eldest daughter, however that plays out. That doesn't mean that that assumption is correct. So there's no magic, easy answer here. Succession planning is probably a conversation that once a company starts to achieve some success and momentum, it's a discussion that should be started as early as people are comfortable having that conversation. Once that conversation starts and it's happening in earnest, and you can keep the emotional drama to a minimum, the question should get very pointed. Who is the potential successor to the founder CEO? What skills do they need to have for where the business is today and where it's going? Maybe a good example is a hypothetical that we can use. One of the big sectors in the MENA region is real estate. A lot of land holdings, a lot of buildings, a lot of rentals, whether they're commercial or residential or some combination. And in the early days of a business, the founder starts the business, puts in a lot of hard work, builds the buildings, secures the loans, etc. And they build a business that the family can live off of. You fast forward 30, 40 years, now we're in the world of technology, and there's a whole category of software called real estate tech. How do you keep your buildings filled or your apartments filled? How do you automatically manage rents and collection of rents? And now all of a sudden, it's not just about knowing how to speak to a banker, raising money, building a building, buying land. It's about real estate operations. And as more and more countries adopt a tax scheme, now you have taxation to contemplate. So, does your successor, whether it's your eldest child or your first cousin or whatever the family relationship is, do they have those skills? So, in this situation, which I think is a very good example for the real world, whether it's the Middle East or the West, the founder's job is to, and it's actually they're the only person that can do this job. They have to start thinking about, gosh, am I ready to slow down? Am I ready to let go of the reins? That doesn't mean completely quit. You have founders that take a big step back from the day to day operations, and instead of being in the office 5 days a week, maybe they're only in the office 2 or 3 days a week. I have a number of colleagues that actually have very successful family offices. One in particular that comes to mind is a gentleman who's in his mid 40s. He has brothers and sisters. He's not the oldest, he's actually the youngest, but he is assuming the responsibility of the family business, which is 49 gas stations that his father built from scratch 40, 50 years ago. The father decided, I'm tired, I'm already in my mid 80s, I'd like to spend more time with my wife, pursuing other hobbies. So he made the determination to start slowing down his involvement in the business and looking to see which of his children had any interest or aptitude to take over the company. And so here we are today, 2025. He now comes into the office maybe once or twice a week. He acts as a advisor to his son, and the son basically runs the business. Now, fortunately for that family, the son is an expert in financing. So as more gas stations are added to the portfolio, he knows how to find the money to make the acquisition. He's also an expert in tax management. So he knows the most efficient method for which to structure the taxation for this business. And operations wise, he's brought in outsiders, people that know how to run gas stations, how to purchase gasoline in bulk, how to select real estate sites. So again, he's not the 100% expert in all subject matter, but he's gone out and found the talent. And I think that's the delicate dance in succession planning is even within your own family, finding the person with the right aptitude, the right skill sets, and quite frankly, not being afraid to bring in talent from outside the family.
Bringing talent from outside the family, doesn't it create a bit of friction? Because there is a sense of entitlement within the kids or within the siblings. How do they deal with that?
If we're continuing down this theme of the family office and you have familial relationships, that's the job of the founder to manage and control the expectations of their children. I'll bring you one other example that I was personally involved with about 10, 12 years ago. A family office was ready to do some estate planning. And I don't want to name names just to keep this important information confidential because it's a public company. But back in the 40s, the grandfather of this family was able to secure the countrywide licenses for ground transportation within the country. The business started as a trucking company. It was moving goods all across the country, fairly medium sized country. And they expanded from trucks to rail cars and ultimately to shipping containers, maritime shipping containers. Business grew like a weed. It was very successful, very, very successful. And over the generation of the grandfather, his children, his grandchildren, the business generated so much cash that the family had an incredibly wealthy life financially. They wanted for nothing. The grandfather passed on the business to his three sons. One of the sons died. The remaining two sons continued to build the business bigger and bigger. It now went from a local country business to an international business. And if you fast forward to when I became involved, those two sons, the two remaining sons, were approaching their early 80s. And as they looked at the family tree, it was really clear that everyone enjoyed the money, but nobody wanted to do the work. At that point, they actually sold a minority chunk of the business to private equity. And there were two private equity firms involved and one venture capital firm. They sold a small chunk for an awful lot of money. That took some of the asset into the family coffers. And the remaining part of the business, they brought in outsiders to start driving more growth and a move towards an IPO. At that point, when the company went public, there was an opportunity yet again for the family office to begin cashing out their shares in the public market, New York Stock Exchange. And at that point, it didn't matter that the family was no longer in control. What was important to the descendants was the cash. But the business and the entire idea and the entire purpose of the company was preserved in the hands of outsiders who were competent at their job, professional in how they did their job, and were compensated well to keep that business alive because they got something out of it that was valuable as well, which was good for their careers, good for their pocketbooks. And so the legacy continues. And if I mention the name of this business and you go into the internet to research the history, it's still there, it's still flourishing, it's still doing well, but there is not a single family member in the business. So it can be done. It just take a lot of hard thought, difficult conversation, expectation setting with the family members. And let's be clear, this we're now down to topics you and I have discussed in prior sessions, which is as a person looks internally, they have to be honest with themselves. Am I good at this thing that I say I want to do? Or is it my ego that's causing me to take on these responsibilities that I really don't enjoy and I'm not really good at it? And by the way, I might kill the business in the process.
That's it for this minisode. Big thanks to Ed and to all of you for tuning in. If this sparked something, hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one, and make sure you share it within your network. Got a question for Ed? Drop it within the comments. See you next time.
Please note, the views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the host and guests and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of any affiliated organization. The content provided is for informational purposes only and should not be considered as professional advice. We encourage listeners to conduct their own research and consult with relevant professionals before making any business or career decisions.